Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Bruce Montalvo Show, broadcasting from the always sunny and beautiful Southern California on LA Talk Radio and AM 1050 KCAA NBC News Radio. It's Sunday, December 9th, 2012, and on today's broadcast, I am honored to speak to Kathy Etchingham, ladies and gentlemen, who is re-releasing her book Through Gypsy Eyes. She was, of course, Jimi Hendrix's longest-term girlfriend, Jimi Hendrix being probably the greatest, if not the greatest, electric guitarist in the history of all time. Now, he was able to break through into mainstream America of the 1960s due to his immense talent in a time when racial oppression and the Vietnam War were prevalent, and whose music still today is still essential to anyone who picks up an electric guitar. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I would like you to please welcome our guest, the inspiration to The Wind Cries Mary and so many other of Jimi's greatest hits. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kathy Etchingham to our broadcast. Thank you, Kathy, for being a guest on our show today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Now, I know it's pretty early out there in Melbourne. It's pretty early, but thank you again for joining us today.
Well, it's about 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's a beautiful sunny day, just like California.
Awesome. Now, Kathy, the 27th of November, it would have marked Jimi's 70th birthday. Now, can you let our listening audience know how you successfully lobbied for an English Heritage Blue plaque, which was placed at 23 Brook Street in London, England, and really also enlighten our listeners as to the significance, the history behind that building?
Well, I wrote to English Heritage probably in the early 90s. I can't remember exactly what year, 1992 perhaps, suggesting that a blue plaque should be erected in his honor. It was an unusual request for them because most of the blue plaques go to members of the establishment or famous artists from the past, scientists, people like that. And it was in the system for quite a while, over a year, maybe 18 months. And I wrote to them again and said, are you looking at it and everything? And eventually he got on the short list. I couldn't believe it. But it wasn't sort of cut and dried because he was only on the short list. Then eventually, after much protests by members of the establishment, they decided that they were going to give him one, that he did make a contribution to society, certainly in the area of music. And it went from there, and we were just bowled over. It was the most unusual thing. It hit the headlines in the newspapers and everything that they'd said yes to it. And the significance of it is that there are lots of plaques for people, but English heritage ones are sort of the creme de la creme of plaques, and you have to have made a significant contribution, to have been dead for more than 20 years, so he qualified, and so it went ahead, and there it is, and it's a tourist attraction, and people go and see it, and so tour buses go past it, and it's it's a great thing. It means that his name will never be forgotten because that'll be there for centuries to come.
Absolutely. And
it's right next to George Frederick Handel's plaque, who lived next door.
Wow.
So it was quite a big thing.
Excellent. Now, Kathy, since the release of your book, 1999, your book Through Gypsy Eyes, it's released rave reviews. One in particular from the Times, calling it a tender memoir of years in the eye of the 60s hurricane. Now, the book's controversial style and fascinating insight paints a true picture of the swinging 60s. Now, can you give our listening audience an inside scoop into your book, Through Gypsy Eyes?
Oh, well, it's quite difficult because it's a book.
Exactly.
But it is. It's all about the 60s. It's about the people we knew and the people that I knew before I knew Jimmy, the nightclub scene, that everybody knew everyone else. It was a much smaller sort of music scene in those days. Everybody knew everyone else. Things are quite different now. And the book tries to go into some sort of detail as to how that was, why it was. And it was an emerging music scene. And it's, you know, it tries to explain all of that. It tries to explain, you know, how Jimmy arrived in England and what he didn't expect and what happened. So it's all about that.
Oh, Kathy.
And some of the things that happened after his death is in there, and
yeah.
Generally it covers the 60s period as best I could.
Okay. Now, it said you really didn't pull any punches in this publication. Now, Kathy, can you let our listening audience know about the first time you met Jimmy, the day he arrived in London, I believe September of 1966?
Yeah. Well, I used to live in an apartment above Zoot Money and his wife, and Chaz brought him round to the flat, to Zoot's flat, straight from the airport, because it was on the way from the airport to the centre of London. And Ronnie, Zoot's wife, came upstairs and said, "Oh, you must come down and see this guy that Chaz has brought back from America. He looks like the wild man of Borneo." But I'd gone to bed late that night, and this was like 11 o'clock in the morning. And I said, "Oh, look, you know, can't be bothered." And she said, "Well, we're all going to go down to the Scotch of St. James's later, so, you know, you can come down with us because he's going to be playing there." But it went in one ear and out of the other. I simply wasn't interested until they started making this terrible racket downstairs where they plugged in the guitars and somebody was on drums and I was right above them. But I still didn't go down. And then later on that evening, we all got ready and went off to the Scotch. And when we walked in, the whole place was standing quietly. I've never seen anything like it before. People were standing on the stairs and everything, listening. And when we got downstairs, because the entrance was on the first floor and the club was in the basement, and when we got downstairs, Ronnie said, "Oh, you know, come over here." So we all went and sat with them. And when Jimmy finished playing, because Chaz was very nervous because Jimmy didn't have a visa to perform. Mm-hmm. He only had a visitor's visa, and they were worried, you know.
Yes.
And and then he came and sat back down again, and he was with Linda Keith at the time. But within, 15 minutes, he'd moved his seat next to mine, and that was it. We got talking, and then there was a bit of a fracas with Linda, and Chaz was terrified in case, you know, police were called and Jimmy was arrested or whatever and deported. So he said, "Well, take Jimmy back to the Hyde Park Towers Hotel." And so we went out and we walked up to Piccadilly, where Jimmy looked the wrong way, nearly got run over by a taxi.
Oh, wow. Because
he looked to his left instead of his right. And I pulled him back by his coat, and it just, you know, nearly touched his chest, the taxi. And anyway, eventually we got back to the Hyde Park Towers Hotel, and all the rest of the people that we were with turned up later. And we all sat around sort of talking and what have you, and that's how we met.
Wow. Now, Jimmy referred to you as his Yoko Ono. I also saw a publication that stated that. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Yes, he did. He told a newspaper that. I can't remember the exact words, but something along those lines, yeah.
Truly love at first sight between the two of you, definitely.
Sorry?
I said it was truly love at first sight.
Yeah. It must have been something like that, but I was quite young. I was only 20 years old, so whether it was love, I don't know, but certainly there was some sort of, immediate attraction there.
Exactly. Now, Kathy, Jimmy was good friends with Eric Clapton, another legendary guitarist. Can you let us know if they ever played together? Did they ever jam together?
Yes. Well, the first time they played together is we went to, I've forgotten which university it was, where Eric Clapton was playing. And I remember we walked in, I was carrying Jimmy's guitar, and Chaz went up to the stage, and Eric leaned down and he asked if Jimmy could, play with them, or, and they all, I think it was, I can't remember which one of them sort of objected. One of them did. But eventually they said yes, and Jimmy took the guitar, went on stage, Eric went round the back, and I think the whole of it was like a, I don't know, was it like a ballroom or something? They all sort of stopped and, oh my goodness, Eric couldn't believe his ears. And I think it was just the one, I think he did Killing Floor, I can't remember, but that was the first time.
Now, Eric even said that the first time he heard Jimmy play, he contemplating quitting guitar altogether because Jimmy was just that good. Your thoughts?
Yeah. He wasn't very happy. He wasn't very happy. He had a very stern look on his face. He was smoking a cigarette really quickly.
I could imagine. Now, you must have seen Jimmy perform hundreds of times. So many legendary performances. Kathy, can you let our listening audience know which performance resonates most, the one that's probably most memorable to you? There's so many to choose from.
No, it's impossible to say, because don't forget, I saw performances that nobody else saw, weren't recorded or anything. In the early days, going around the north of England, playing in clubs and things.
Yes.
When he was absolutely perfect. He wasn't quite so... he wasn't such a perfectionist then. He didn't have a huge audience, so he could do as he pleased. And some of those performances were probably some of his best, but went unrecorded.
Wow. Now, were you there at Woodstock 1969?
No, I didn't. No.
I think that's probably my favorite performance. Of course, I wasn't alive, but when I as a guitar player myself, I see that performance and I'm just blown away by his interpretation of the Star-Spangled Banner.
I know.
Amazing.
He could play God Save the Queen as well.
Excellent.
But that went unrecorded too.
Now, Kathy, it's obvious that the paparazzi of today, they're much different than those of yesterday in your day. Kathy, can you let our listening audience know about the run-ins that you and Jimmy had with the paparazzi, and the fact that Jimmy also stated that he didn't really feel safe in New York City?
No, I know that. We didn't really have any run-ins with paparazzi because there wasn't a sort of organised paparazzi in those days. So, one could walk around the streets without anybody taking any photographs or anything. You could come and go. There was never anyone outside the apartments or anything like that taking photographs. I think in today's world, you wouldn't be able to walk around so freely as you could then. In fact, I know for a fact you couldn't. Every move would be captured on camera. That wasn't the case then. Photographers didn't follow you around. Photographs were taken, but they were usually sort of organised. You knew that there's going to be somebody there taking photographs. But generally speaking, we went all over the place. We could walk around Oxford Street, which is a major shopping street in London, without anybody taking any photographs or bothering us in any way. you occasionally had somebody come up and say, "Can I have your autograph?"
Exactly.
But generally speaking, there aren't that many photographs around of him privately in the street or anything like that. Just a few. So that's the difference between then and now.
Well, Kathy, Jimmy was an essential figure due to his lyrics in the civil rights movement. He gained a lot of attention, and unfortunately, it caused the Federal Bureau of Investigations to actually open up a file on him. I believe in 1969. There were also, tons of bogus charges thrown against him in this time. Can you let our listeners know about those bogus charges and the run-ins he had with Johnny Law, so to say?
Well, I don't really know that. I didn't know that the FBI had opened a file on him. I've only learnt that since. It's something that I wouldn't. Well, I don't suppose he knew about it either. And I think that it was like in England, the police were always out to get a celebrity because it sort of furthered their career and they got themselves in the papers. And I think that in those days, the police were not more corrupt than they are now and used to plant drugs on rock stars and then charge them with it.
Exactly.
And I think that happened more than once. So I don't really know why they did that or why they opened a file on him, because he wasn't really radical in any way. His lyrics were his lyrics, but he wasn't an activist in any way whatsoever.
Exactly.
He might have made comments which they interpreted as being radical, but I knew Jimmy quite well, and sometimes he'd say things, but his heart wasn't in it. He wasn't an activist,
okay,
or politically minded at all.
Okay, well,
I don't think so. Well, certainly when I was with him, he wasn't. He may have changed in the last year of his life, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything that he's said or I think things have been attributed to him that he didn't actually say.
Okay.
But I haven't seen anything that sort of shows that he was in any way, radicalized.
Okay. Well, Kathy, since Jimmy's death, he died September 18, 1970. You've asked. There's actually a lot of editorials from 1991 to 1992 where you asked Scotland Yard to open up a new investigation to reinvestigate. Due to the toxicology report, you gained considerable information regarding that report. Can you let our listening audience know about your attempt to open up a new investigation into Jimmy's death at that time?
Well, having seen the documents, I didn't think that a proper investigation had been done. There seemed to have been conflicting accounts of what happened, and in the years subsequent to his death, the person that was supposed to be there with him had made different statements, different to the ones that she'd made to the coroner. So I simply wrote to the Attorney General saying, here are all these interviews. Here is what she says here. Here is what's said there. Here is what's said the other. Would you consider reopening this, this case and try and find out exactly what did happen? Exactly. And having read the dossier and seen all the conflicting statements and what was actually said in the coroner's court, they decided that there was enough evidence there to reinvestigate it, and that's exactly what they did. So most of the people that were down there refused to be interviewed by the police. The FBI went to see some of the people that were in the United States, and they refused as well. And they took a long statement from the woman that was with him at the time. And she had her lawyers there and everything, which they thought was quite unusual. And that dossier is with Scotland Yard still, and so no one can actually see it because it's confidential. but I have an idea, which I will be writing about in the future, of what the outcome of that investigation was.
Absolutely. Now, you stated...
Yeah, but I want to put it into writing so that it's more concise and...
Absolutely. Now,
yeah.
Kathy, you stated to the alternative press in London, in that publication, I read it from the Ellsberg Daily Record in 1993, you stated, I don't think it should have happened. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people. And
yes, and I still think that.
He also, it said he left a message to his manager stating, I need help, bad, man. And there's so many other statements. His bassist from the Jimi Hendrix Experience stated, who takes 9 downers and drinks a bottle of wine, in disbelief?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what I will be writing about. The tablets are very, very powerful. Each tablet was a double dose of a barbiturate, I think it was, or some kind of barbiturate combined with an antihistamine. And the woman's statement, Monica Danneman's statement, kept saying, I told him these were very weak. These were very weak tablets. Well, they weren't. They were very powerful. So, in fact, he'd imbibed 18 times the normal dose.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, those tablets were only available in Germany, where she came from. They've never been available in the United States and never been available in the UK. And both the UK and the United States never made double doses of anything, but the Germans did. They since stopped doing it for that very reason, and those tablets are no longer available because they were too dangerous. So those are her tablets in him. And what was she doing with them? What was she doing with those tablets?
Exactly. Now, those tablets, they were, I believe they were titled Vestarex. Is that correct?
Vesparax.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I also read that Jimi may have been an insomniac. Is there any relevance to that?
Well, certainly wasn't when I knew him. He slept quite well. I don't know what happened in that last year, but it all seemed to spiral downhill. I think he was mixing with the wrong people. He got caught up in, I don't know, sort of a very strange set of people. He had lots of hangers-on and people that weren't good for him. And he wasn't having any relaxing times, He couldn't sit in front of the television and sort of just enjoy himself with, a night in.
Exactly.
And he was out every night. And I think it just became too much for him, Jimmy didn't like being alone. He liked company. And so he didn't know these people. He didn't know this woman. He'd only met her on the Tuesday, and he was dead by the Friday morning.
Wow. Although
she claimed that she'd known him since 1969, and there's a picture of her and him, but actually the picture's cropped down from a larger picture with all the fans. She was one of them in a group photograph in the lobby of a hotel in Germany. And she'd cropped it down to just the two of them to make it look as if it was a sort of an intimate photograph. So I've come to the conclusion that she was barking mad. And he fell into the hands of basically a stalker.
Wow.
That's my opinion.
Now, there are so many loose ends when you investigate Jimmy's death. I mean, I saw a statement in which you stated that it took them 5 hours to call an ambulance. I mean, that's sketchy right off the bat. That is sketchy.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to some of the people that were down there. I spoke to them, and at that time it was before the police investigation, so they spoke more freely. And they all said that they got the call at the first light of dawn.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time that was, I've forgotten now, 6:30 or something like that, 7 o'clock. And they all went round there and cleaned the place up and what have you. And I said, well, what was Jimmy doing? And they said, Well, he was on the bed, but I couldn't look. And the phone call to the ambulance went in at 18 minutes past 11. So all that was going on beforehand. And he was definitely dead when he was taken from the hotel room. Because very recently, one of the senators here, Senator Bob Brown, who's just recently retired, about 3 months ago at a press club meeting, the journalist asked him, because he was one of the doctors that received Jimmy that morning, asked him, about Jimi Hendrix, and he said, I've told you before, he'd been dead for hours before he was brought in. So there's another mistake, because the ambulance attendants shouldn't have taken him. They should have called the police. But they took him to the hospital, but he was already dead.
Wow.
So all these mistakes were made, And the autopsy was very brief and he was taken in on Friday, but they didn't do the autopsy until the following Monday, so there was no indication of how long he'd been dead. All you've got is the doctors. All of the doctors have been identified, and they all say he was dead.
Well,
and
I saw
and that when they put him on a monitor, it was just flatlining.
Wow.
And that his trachea and his lungs were full of wine.
Kathy, I also took a look at the toxicology report, or at least some reports of it, and they state that there was only 20 milligrams of blood of alcohol in his system.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically, I mean, he wasn't drunk. If you do the math, 20 milligrams.
No, he wasn't. But I can't explain that. All I can think of is that, excuse me, I've got a bit of hay fever. All I can think is that he probably hadn't drank that much, but he was drinking when he went unconscious.
Wow.
That's what I think, possibly, and that it went down the wrong way into his lungs. That's the only thing I can think of.
And it's just so strange because he was also found fully clothed, and it's just, there's just so many strange anomalies in this case. I mean,
he was fully dressed, so he wasn't in bed, obviously. So whatever happened that morning, we'll never really know, because the person that he was with committed suicide. So, and took whatever happened that morning with her. You can only piece together bits and pieces of it. All I really know is whatever was going on down there, as Chas Chandler said, there was a conspiracy of negligence.
Wow. Now,
they were looking after their own
interests. They were looking after their own interests.
That's right.
Kathy, it's said that Jimmy's manager, Michael Jeffrey, probably had the most to gain from Jimmy's untimely death, and apparently he even confessed to, I believe it was a roadie from the Animals. Jeffrey has since been dead since 1973.
Yeah.
But he confessed to basically taking part in maybe in the murder of Jimmy.
Yeah, well, tell me how he managed to do it.
He did own the rights to Voodoo Child, Purple Haze, so I mean, in fact, we'll probably never know, but there is a lot of blame that is placed at his doorstep, possibly. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, he's dead, isn't he? He can't defend himself.
Yes.
You can say anything you like. You said anything. But when the police investigation was going on, it was all over the newspapers, all over the world. Anybody that had that kind of information had a civic duty to step forward and tell the police what they knew. They didn't.
Wow. Now,
see?
Kathy...
so that's those are my thoughts on it,
Okay.
If that was the case,
yes,
you wouldn't keep something like that to yourself.
Wow.
And it's a bit short on detail, isn't it?
Yes.
How did he do it?
Those are definitely the speculations that have arisen over the years since Jimmy's death. Now, I heard there's a film being in the process, a Jimi Hendrix film.
Yes, I've heard that too.
What's the scoop on that? Do you know anything?
I don't know. It's nothing to do with me. Nobody's asked me about it.
Okay.
So I can only imagine it's some sort of drama, that it's not actually a biopic, because if it was a biopic, surely you would want the help of the people that were actually there, especially over costumes and things.
Exactly.
But they didn't. So I assume it's being produced by Cheapskate Productions.
Oh, no.
I don't know who they are or what they're doing.
Okay.
It's all very secret, isn't it?
It is. They don't want to let the people know right away their plans, I guess.
Yeah.
Well,
I hope it's not going to be a terrible embarrassment for me.
That's the thing with these pictures. We hope to have some type of say in them. And when they come out, I would hope they would go to you. I mean, you were his longtime girlfriend, his Yoko Ono, basically, and I'm hearing that they didn't even extend you a call or get any conjecture on your thoughts.
No, they're going to portray me without knowing me. They reckon that they've got it all from newspaper articles and archives.
That's not good at all. No.
Yeah, it's obviously it's not. It can't be. They can't be serious. I mean, it can't be a serious biopic.
Well, Kathy, I would like to ask you the tragic demise of Jimmy. He's so respected. He's the greatest electric guitarist, in my opinion, to ever live. I mean, you want people to focus on the charismatic, on the happy figure that he was, that he represented in your life and in so many other people's lives. Can you let our listening audience know just exactly how you would like the people to remember Jimmy?
I would like people to remember Jimmy as a guitar genius and a really nice guy. He was just an ordinary, really nice guy whose company anybody would want to be in. He was funny, he was amusing, he was generous, and he was well-mannered. People don't know that, but Jimmy used to open the door for me, used to light my cigarette for me, pour my drink for me. Mm-hmm. The only thing he didn't do is make my tea for me, because he never mastered how to do that. So I would like him to be remembered as a really, nice guy who brought great pleasure to the world through his enormous talent.
Absolutely.
That's how I'd like him to be remembered.
Kathy?
Not as some drug-crazy lunatic, which he wasn't, People have written to me on my Facebook saying he was a drug addict. No, he wasn't.
Exactly.
So, hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Are you there?
I'm listening.
He wasn't a drug addict. It's as simple as that. I mean, I don't know what happened in the days leading up to, or months leading up to his death, but certainly when I knew him, he wasn't. And we never had anything like that in the house.
Yeah.
It was really just down to a few joints. And we didn't have anything harder than that.
And that's never harmed anybody to this day, unless
no, they just made it legal, haven't they, in Washington? Is it in Washington?
Yes, I believe Washington and Colorado. Yes.
Well, there you go. And it was made legal in the UK a long time ago for personal use, small amounts of personal use, and that's all. That's all that was ever there. But in those days, of course, to have a small amount of cannabis or something like that was a terrible crime that you could go to jail for. So everyone was very careful.
Jimmy did get booked a couple of times. That's what I was referring earlier. And they even, I believe it's even rumored that one of his managers even might have planted him planted the drugs on him.
Why would they do that?
Well, they you didn't see that information where he was caught up with I believe a small amount of cannabis or something of that sort?
Not in England.
Okay.
No, the only time I know that there was some trouble was in America when somebody put something in his bag and he was going to Canada. I think he was going to Canada, and then they found the drug in his bag that some fan had put in there. But in England, no. The only time we had a narrow escape was we lived in Ringo Starr's flat in Montague Square, and we left, found another flat around the corner, just that's down the road. We left, and John Lennon and Yoko Ono moved in. And shortly afterwards, the police raided it and busted John Lennon. And I think that they thought they were going to get Jimi Hendrix, but we'd already gone. And so John Lennon got busted instead.
Wow. Amazing stories. Well, Kathy,
Sorry?
An amazing story indeed. Well, Kathy, can you let our listening audience know where they can find your book through Gypsy Eyes?
Well, it's available on Kindle, and you can download it to your iPhone or your computer, as well as if you've got a Kindle device. And if you go to my Facebook, Kathy Etchingham's Facebook, there's a link through to my website, and you just press on the cover, and it takes you through to Kindle. And you can download it onto your computer if you haven't got a Kindle, or your iPhone. That's how you get it.
Excellent. Well, Kathy, I got to let you know before we leave, I was exposed to Jimmy when I was about 14 years old. I was going through my father's old records, and I found Midnight Lightning. You remember that one?
Yeah, do.
Oh, that is my favorite record. Midnight Lightning, also not many songs that are known about. Isabella.
Yes, Isabella, yeah.
Of course, Voodoo Child. So many epic hits from a legendary rock virtuoso. Thank you, Kathy, so much for being on my broadcast today. Thank you, and I know it's early out in Melbourne. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Okay, Bruce. Nice talking to you. And hello, Los Angeles.
Thank you, Kathy. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Kathy Etchingham, former girlfriend, the long-term girlfriend of Jimi Hendrix. Well, that does it for us here at LA Talk Radio and AM 1050 KCAA NBC News Radio. Now, before we do go off the air, I would like to take this time to thank my good friends over at espymall.com. Again, for all your home surveillance needs, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to visit espymall.com. Well, that does it for us here at the Bruce Montalvo Show. Be sure to tune in 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on KCAA 1050 and 12 noon Pacific Standard Time here on LA Talk Radio. Thank you for joining me, and remember that the freedom of the press is our right and our responsibility. Till next time.